This brand new game is from the creators of some of the most fantastic and certainly my most played strategy games. Here's looking at you, humankind. I'm talking about Amplitude Studios. They are back with a sequel that we've been waiting for roughly a decade now, a sequel to one of their most popular titles, highly reviewed. Endless Legend is back with a sequel, Endless Legend 2. Here's the brand new trailer, hot off the press, with my thanks to Amplitude Studios for providing me with an early look, as well as sponsoring this video. Now, the trailer reveals, obviously, the brand new title, a mixture of gameplay, sort of pseudo-cinematic shots that look like they're rendered within the world, as well as some broader, more animated cinematic pieces that are showing off not gameplay, but perhaps some of the many factions or units that will be available in Endless Legend 2. We'll of course watch the trailer in full, then I'll slow down some of the perhaps more key moments afterwards, and finally we'll take a look out at what we know, what it is, and also the original Endless Legend. This part of the trailer is perhaps my favorite bit, so it's a good time for me to finish the introductory section. I love the look of the waves crashing up against what looks to be an actual city inside of Endless Legend 2. As the seasons change, the storm lifts away, we see the clouds retreat and the world comes into full blossom. The world is another part that I'll be pretty interested in. I've said for a long time, in these strategy games, you stare at the world forever. The world matters immensely, and this one, from these quick looks fairly vibrant, kind of somewhat capturing the vibe that I particularly liked around humankind. It's relatively clean, it's relatively clear, but it's also bright. There's contrast and an interesting actual world around it. However, of course, it's early days yet, for this is just the initial reveal trailer. Though thankfully it's not actually as early days as it might seem, for as is revealed right at the end here, the game is available to wishlist now on Steam and will be coming soon to early access. So of course, if you're interested in what we're looking at, you should absolutely go and give the game a wishlist. Here are a couple of slow-mo highlights, seeing units as well as cities, buildings, developments, and that world. Again, I love the look, I love the color of the world. Here, again, perhaps my favorite shot, slowed right down to savor it, all of it in. Finally, here, for this part of the video, at the end of the trailer, we are reminded Endless Legend 2 is available to wishlist now, coming soon to early access, and we see the different parts that are involved with it. From Amplitude through to amplifiers, their platform. I see Hooded Horse there, which actually reminds me to get to the concrete details as we turn our eyeballs now towards the first game, the initial Endless Legend. Focusing back on the detail for the sequel though, Endless Legend 2 will, quote, soon be available in early access on Steam, with 4 unique factions inside of early access, and 2 more to be added by the full release. The Insiders program, that Amplitude Amplified program, will be open for new players starting on the 30th of January. There will be an exclusive opportunity to playtest the game before the release of early access, so you can get your hands on it before it even arrives in that Steam early access. How about it? It is, of course, finally provided by Amplitude Studios, and if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you will be well familiar with them, for as I've already alluded to, they are of course also the developers of Humankind, and we've played so much Humankind. And in the few years now, crazily, since the release of Humankind, Amplitude and the publisher of that game, Sega, have gone their separate ways. Amplitude went out into independence, and now a big release, as we've already discussed, is coming from them in the form of Endless Legend 2. Looking back, playing some Endless Legend again, the original, and Amplitude's catalogue more broadly, it reminded me of some of the ways that Amplitude produce their games, some of the things that set them apart from other strategy games, from other 4X games. Some I've already talked about. The world. It's relatively, in my opinion, easy to look at, but still vibrant, engaging enough to keep me fascinated, but not too distracting that I can't pay attention to the actual game. And I think that that actually is a piece of sentiment that has generally held true for most of the Amplitude titles that I've played in recent years. Legend, Space, Humankind, it's all generally true. And then there are pieces of innovation. When it comes to Endless Legend, I like the little things that it does, sometimes the big things. I mean, take the Empire plan, for example. Save up your influence points that are being generated by your cities, and then choose how you'd like to spend it. In this case, perhaps shifting slightly more towards the militaristic ones, somewhat unexpectedly for my faction, as I come under threat from all sides in this territory-based city-building system that is, of course, a much larger, much more dynamic map. If you are unfamiliar with Endless Legend, the original at least, and again we'll have to carry through some assumptions as to what Endless Legend 2 might look like, because it will bring its own, I'm sure, evolutions, innovation, and change. But to just look at how Endless Legend operates, we see a, again familiar to Humankind, battlefield here, for example, that takes place within the world. You'll march your units around in the world of Endless Legend, led by some powerful heroes with their own equipment that your cities and resources will be integral in producing. As that hero marches around and leads an army, it may stumble into those fights that are carried out on the map. I love that a lot. The city building itself, like I'm doing here in Endless Legend 1, was relatively easy. The UI view showing you the yield you're going to get, and then zooming out and actually being able to see the entire map, incredibly useful for forward planning around territories. There are some other broader elements that I think you should be aware of, remember, maybe even look forward to for Endless Legend 2. The level of customization, thinking specifically about the factions here, by the way. Some of the other things that we've already talked about, the leaders who will lead your armies within those, as well as the broader world. Speaking of the world, something that I don't want to overlook just before I end the video in this last chapter here, are not just the ways in which the world is interesting to look at, but also how it interacts with the gameplay. Not just your empire developments or your city planning, but moreover the quests and the minor factions within the world. They are fairly strong, fairly numerous, and play a big role in how you progress through. The kind of territory that will be hospitable to you, or hostile toward you. Unique weapons, armor, all sorts of interactions. The minor factions played a massive role, as well as the quests and the broader sort of missions, the objectives, whatever you want to call them, around it. It's a very unique world in that you feel like you're both playing a traditional kind of a 4X game. Of course, that's what Endless Legend is, was, and will be to its core, but also those more kind of fantasy RPG elements, leaning into the storytelling a little bit more, should you choose to, and the numerous factions and the many different ways that they play out. Layer on top of that some difficult seasonality and some other neat features, and Endless Legend 1 is a very charming game, despite it, as I've already mentioned, being over a decade old at this point, which also probably means it's time for a refresh, and that brings us full circle back to Endless Legend 2. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. If you'd like more Endless Legend 2, let me know down in the comments below. I would like some more Endless Legend 2. Also, thank you to Amplitude Studios, whose games have featured here for a long time, for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to check out Endless Legend 2, you can do so by clicking through the link down in the description below. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.